Hello everyone. Wherever you are watching this from, I hope your heart is at peace and your mind is safe. Today's story is not just emotional, it's explosive. A woman returns to the place where it all began. But the past has teeth, and it bites hard. Stay with us, because what unfolds next might leave you speechless. And thank you truly for being here. Your support means more than words. Let's dive into a chapter you will never forget. Dieu Han returned home only to find the same fire still burning. The two men who once cared for her now couldn't stand the sight of each other. Their rivalry had turned violent, and every glance was a threat. She stood frozen between them, torn, confused, and afraid. Love wasn't supposed to feel like this. It was supposed to be safe. But this was chaos. This was war in disguise. If you were in her place, would you choose or walk away? If your heart raced even once while watching this, don't leave just yet. Hit the like button. It tells us you're here, feeling this too. Subscribe to stay with Dieu Han on this journey through love, fear, and survival. And most importantly, turn on the notification bell, because the next episode will shake everything again. Thank you for watching. Thank you for feeling. You are part of this story now, and it won't be the same without you. Dieu Han stepped into the house carrying Tom in her arms. The same walls, the same furniture, but nothing felt the same. She whispered to him softly, like trying to convince herself that this was safety. Her body was home, but her heart still wandered. Each step echoed memories she didn't ask for. She smiled at her son, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. This was the end of a journey. But peace doesn't arrive just because the road ends. Not yet. Each morning, she dressed Tom with gentle hands, kissed his soft cheeks, and whispered promises she didn't know if she could keep. Life around them was quiet, almost kind, but inside, her thoughts were loud. She wished her son never had to see fear in her eyes. She wished she could protect him from the weight she still carried. Every diaper changed, every lullaby sung was an attempt to build a normal she hadn't found for herself yet. She rarely looked in the mirror now. Not because of how she looked, but because she feared seeing the mother she was trying to become. One who smiles when her chest still aches. One who sings when her voice trembles. Tom didn't know her pain, only her presence. And that was enough, for now. But she wondered, how long could she pretend? How long could love for her child mask the emptiness that still haunted every quiet night? There were moments when Tom laughed, and the sound brought light into the room. Dieu Han held onto those seconds like breath. She rocked him gently, watching the world shrink to their small corner of peace. But peace, she knew, could be fragile. She kissed his forehead, silently praying. Not just for safety, but for the strength to keep going. Being a mother meant carrying more than love. It meant standing tall even when every part of you wants to fall. She no longer chased answers. She fed Tom, changed him, held him close, and that became her purpose. The world outside kept spinning, but hers had narrowed to lullabies and quiet footsteps. She didn't need much. Just a moment to breathe. A moment where fear didn't win. Each night she whispered, "We're here. We're okay." And maybe, one day, she'd believe it. For now, surviving was still sacred. And in her son's warmth, she found the only truth she needed. Outside, birds sang. Life moved on. But inside that small home, time had a different rhythm, slower, softer. More fragile. Dieu Han didn't know what the future held. But when she watched Tom sleep, his tiny hand curled near her heart, she felt a quiet kind of hope. The kind that didn't shout, but stayed. And maybe that was enough. Healing wasn't a destination, it was this. Breathing, loving, trying. And choosing, every single day, to keep showing up. She barely had time to breathe when the knock came. As she opened the door, Dan was already pulling her into his arms. His hug was trembling, desperate, full of unspoken fear. "I thought I lost you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You disappeared, and every night I wondered if you were still alive." Dieu Han stood frozen. Her face was pale, her hands weak. but his embrace was warm. And in that moment, she let herself lean on someone again. He didn't let go. "Are you okay? I heard you were taken. I thought I was losing my mind. I've been looking for you everywhere. When I heard you were back, I dropped everything." His eyes held nothing back. She nodded faintly, lips trembling. "I'm okay, just tired." She didn't mention the bruises or the fear. Only her eyes spoke now. And somehow, his presence made it all come crashing down. "I should have been there, Dieu Han. I should have protected you." His voice cracked again, and he pressed her closer. She could feel his heart racing. "I prayed every night. Just once, to see you safe." She didn't answer. Her eyes filled with tears, not from pain, but from the weight of being missed. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't alone. She didn't have to fight. Someone had been waiting. Someone still cared. "They said you were gone. Rumors everywhere. And I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat." Dan cupped her face gently. "Did they hurt you? Tell me, please." Dieu Han looked down. Her silence said more than words. Dan's hands tightened. He closed his eyes, breathing in slowly, trying to hold himself together. "I'm here now. You don't have to be strong anymore." His forehead touched hers. "Let me carry some of the pain. Just for tonight, please." Tom clung to her leg, watching silently. Dan crouched down, gave the boy a gentle smile, then looked back up at Dieu Han. "You both matter to me. Not just you. Both of you. Don't ever forget that." Her lips trembled again. She had fought so long, held back so much. But those words, spoken so honestly, broke something inside her. She reached for his hand. And for the first time, she didn't pull away. "I don't need you to be perfect, Dieu Han. Just let me in. Let someone care." Dan's voice was barely a whisper. She looked at him, unsure what to say. No one had said those words before. Not like this. Not after everything. Her body was tired, her soul even more. But in Dan's eyes, there was no demand, no pressure, just patience. Just quiet love. And that was exactly what she had been craving all along. She leaned her head against his chest, finally allowing herself to rest. Dan gently stroked her hair, whispering, "You're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you again." Every word was a vow, stitched from pain and hope. Dieu Han didn't speak. Her eyes were closed, breathing steady. The weight she carried began to lift, bit by bit. For the first time, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Not just as a survivor, but as someone deeply, truly loved. In the silence between them, something bloomed. Not fireworks, not drama, just a quiet beginning. One where pain wasn't ignored, but seen. Where love didn't rush, but waited. Dan held her again, more gently this time. "You don't have to answer now, just let me stay." Dieu Han nodded, her hand still in his. Maybe love doesn't come loud. Maybe it comes like this, soft, steady, after the storm. And for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. He stood still, just a few steps away. The bowl in his hand was still warm, but his chest had turned cold. Dan had come with nothing but quiet care, hoping she might need something to eat. But what he saw stopped him. Dan was holding her, and she didn't pull away. 1,000 words rose in his throat, but he swallowed them all. He took a small step back, unsure if he was still welcome in that moment, then clenched the bowl tighter, his fingers pressing into the ceramic. He wasn't angry, at least, not with her. She had suffered, nearly broken, and now someone was holding her back together. But something inside him twisted painfully. He had seen her in her weakest moments, cared for her in silence. And yet, he had no place in that embrace. His role was different. He was the quiet shadow. And shadows don't belong in the light. Memories flashed, nights watching over her, mornings making soup, moments when she finally smiled again. Then never asked for anything. He just wanted her safe, alive. But deep down, he had hoped. Not for romance, maybe, but for space in her heart. A place she could return to. Seeing her now, letting someone else in, it hurt more than he expected. Not because she owed him anything, but because he had given so much without knowing if it meant anything at all. He thought of turning back, leaving the bowl by the gate, walking away quietly. But something rooted him there. Pride, perhaps. Or stubbornness. Or love that hadn't figured out how to let go. Than took a shaky breath. He wasn't here to compete. He was here because he cared. Even if it was from the outside looking in. Even if the door never opened for him. Some people love with distance. And some hearts never stop waiting, even when they're breaking. Then finally stepped back. Just enough to not be seen, but close enough to hear. He placed the bowl gently on the stone ledge by the path. A quiet gift. No name, no note. Just a gesture. His eyes lingered on her once more. Then he turned, walking away slowly, each step heavier than the last. He didn't know if she'd ever find that bowl. But maybe she would feel it. The care. Big. The love that said nothing but meant everything. Behind him, Diep stayed still. No one called his name. No footsteps followed. But then didn't expect them to. This wasn't a movie. This was life, messy and fair, and full of people who cared to late. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He just walked. One hand in his pocket, the other brushing the pain away from his chest. For now, silence was all he had. But sometimes, silence speaks louder than any goodbye. Just as he turned to leave, he heard her voice, soft, warm, calling his name. Then froze. For a moment, the pain in his chest loosened. Dieu Han had seen him. She hadn't forgotten. Her eyes met his with a gentle smile, and she waved him in. That small gesture unraveled the walls he had built inside. Part of him wanted to run. But part of him longed to step closer, even if it was only for a moment more. He stepped inside slowly, like someone afraid of waking a dream. The bowl was still warm in her hands. She looked at him like she always did, with that quiet gratitude he could never explain. But Dan wasn't alone in the room. Dan stood nearby, arms crossed, jaw tight. He watched every step Dan took. The air grew heavier. Dan could feel it. Not a word was spoken, but everything was loud. The tension, the history, and the feelings they all carried. Dan didn't say anything, but his silence had weight. He had just embraced Dieu Han, whispered worries, offered warmth. And now here came Then, the quiet guardian, the one who never asked but always gave. Dan felt something stir in him, an unease, a shadow of competition. He wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that Then was here, or the fact that Dieu Han wanted him to be. It wasn't jealousy. It was the fear of being replaceable. Then sat down, unsure of where to place his hands, his words, his heart. The warmth of being invited and clashed with the cold edge of Dan's presence. He tried to act normal, to smile, but his eyes kept drifting to Dieu Han. She was talking gently, unaware, or perhaps pretending, not to notice the storm brewing between the two men. Dan wanted peace. But he also wanted to be seen, really seen, not just as someone who helped, but someone who mattered. Dieu Han looked from one man to the other, her heart tightening. She could feel it, the shift in the air, the glances that said too much without a word. Dan's eyes lingered on Then just a little longer than they should. Then didn't look away, but his gaze wasn't aggressive. It was something else. Resigned. Sad. Protective. Dieu Han gently placed the cup down, her smile faltering. She knew this was more than silence. It was history, pain, and something unresolved. They didn't argue. They didn't speak. But their eyes carried a story Dieu Han was only beginning to understand. A silent duel, one shaped not by anger, but by feelings too deep to name. Then looked at her like she was something he had quietly protected. Dan looked like he was afraid of losing what he never truly had. And in that fragile space between them, Dieu Han stood still, wondering what would happen next if hearts finally dared to speak. What if one of them confessed everything? What if she had to choose? Could any heart walk away unbroken? This moment might change everything. And you, if you were her, what would you do? Stay tuned, because the next chapter may hold the most unexpected turn yet. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more, and hit the bell so you never miss what happens next in Dieu Han's tangled story of love, loss, and choices that hurt.